Oh boy, I tell you, this isn't good. Ugh. I've been trying to convince folks to minimize the amount of electricity they need in life and maybe get solar panels. And I know a lot of my subscribers have, and I don't know if a lot is a true statement. I know some of the people who comment have done it. I know some people who are gonna actually live off grid. And if you got some solar panels, it's not hard to hook up. I mean, you can go over to my channel, go to playlist, you'll see solar panels, and I describe how to hook them up. Over the last summer, I was redoing all my solar panels, and I went through it very detailed on how to do it all. And that way, if an emergency ever happens to you, power outage, winter storms, hurricanes, you would have some electric available where you could run maybe your freezer or different things. So this is the best solution. Possibly not solar panels, but the best solution is batteries. And so if you could get a series of batteries together like I got, it's a little dark in here and a little noisy, the light will adjust a bit. So if you had some batteries and you hook positive to positive, positive, positive all the way down, negative, negative, negative all the way down, that gives me 775 amp hours of electricity. I know that doesn't mean a lot, but that helps me get through the evening, the nighttime, running my freezer, some fans, and then I have an inverter, so that battery, DC electric, goes through the inverter, becomes AC electric, and now you can power your freezer. And if you look, you might be able to see in the camera, I'm not sure, you might be able to see that that is a plug-in, just a regular house plug-in. At the back of this, you can see maybe, you know, there's a positive there, a negative, that's going straight to the battery. So it takes battery electricity and turns it into house electricity. That's the best solution. I know a lot of people get generators. I'm going to talk about generators here in just a second. But even if you were an emergency and you wanted to run your generator, let's say you were out of electricity like for a hurricane, the one that's getting ready to hit Florida. And I want to talk more in detail about that in a minute. My dad's down there. He might get hit by it. If you had a generator and you needed to go 2 weeks without electricity, which my dad has, it's hard to run a generator for 2 weeks because you're not going to have gas. How much gas can you store? You figure if you got 2 jugs, I have 2 jugs of gasoline, 2 5-gallon jugs, that would give me about 100 and some odd hours, maybe 110 hours of run time. So we're talking what, about 4 days, a little bit more than 4 days maybe of run time. That's day and night. That's 10 gallons of gas. So you would have to have a lot of gasoline to get through 2 weeks. So if you could reduce the amount of runtime on your generator, that would save on gasoline. If you had a battery setup, I know when I was living as a nomad, we had 2 batteries and we would run the generator 8 hours a day. That was a lot less than 24 hours a day. And we would just charge the battery up with the generator 2 times a day, once in the morning, once in the evening. So we'd plug this little car charger into the generator and then hook the positive and negative up to the batteries, run it for 4 hours, shut it off, and then again in the evening I would do the same thing before I went to bed. And that would run our refrigerator and tablets and different things. That is the most efficient way to use a generator, is if you had an inverter and a battery charger with some batteries. It's a lot more expensive than just having the generator, but you're not going to use near as much gas. But I've preached about that for endless amount of time. The other thing you can do is if you just need to run your freezer in these emergencies, you could just run the freezer for an hour or 2, then shut off your generator and let it sit for 3 or 4 hours without turning back on, and then turn it back on for a couple hours. That way you're not running it all day and all night. See, that refrigerator or freezer turns on, shuts off, turns on. And I've noticed our freezer runs about 15 minutes, shuts off for about 15 minutes, and turns on for 15 minutes. So there's a half hour out of each hour. You're not using the generator for anything, but you're still using gas because you're just letting it run. If you could just run it for an hour or 2 to let it cool back down and then shut off, you want to make sure that you put a thermometer in your freezer and you monitor the temperature. Once it gets up to about 25 degrees, you're going to have to just turn the generator on and let it run. The freezer won't shut off during that time. I know, because when we put raw meat, fresh meat, in the freezer to freeze it, it takes 3 days for that freezer to freeze all that meat. So if it starts to thaw out, you're gonna have to just run the generator. But remember, you're using maximum amount of power out of it now. It's not turning on, shutting off, turning on, shut it off. But in the end, it's still gonna use a lot of gas. So I still recommend the battery idea. My dad is down in Florida right now, and last night or yesterday, this is Monday here, so yesterday was Sunday, he found out that the hurricane was coming his direction. I messaged him to make sure he knew. He lives a quarter of a mile up the hill from the Gulf Coast, so he's getting ready to get smacked. Now, it has moved south a little bit today, so he might get brushed by it. Depends on what happens, but it's kind of went south up from him a little bit, or southeast. But he has went through some traumatic hurricanes. A few years ago, he went through a hurricane, and he stayed there. He couldn't get out for 2 weeks. Now, about 3 or 4 months later, I came down to visit him. Now, everything had been repaired by then, but the road had actually been washed away. It was such a violent tide or whatever, so it had been washed away, so he couldn't get out. And even if he could get out, I don't know if the trees would have been down. I know when we were driving the highway, probably 40 miles north of the coast, all the trees in between the eastbound and westbound lanes, all those trees have been knocked down. It was just incredible how much damage there was. I always think about these hurricanes when they're getting ready to head his way. He's just a natural survivalist. He doesn't seem to ever panic about everything. He never has the equipment he needs, but he always seems to manage. My entire life he's been that way. He's like MacGyver. Oh, I'll figure it out. I at least have to have some comfort that I'm not a prepper. I've said that a million times. I'm not a prepper. I do want to live off grid, and living off grid gives me the advantages of not needing electric from the power company, but he always seems to manage. I know that the last time his neighbors had a generator and he's got a well, so he said, let me borrow your generator and I'll hook up my well to your generator and we'll all get water out of it. So, I mean, just the way he thinks, he doesn't even really panic about it. But the rest of us, who is not MacGyver, have to think about these things. So if you do have a generator, you need to get it out right now. By the time this video releases, you're gonna have about 12 hours before that hurricane hits. So get your generator out right now, as soon as this video is over. Get some gasoline in it and start it. Now remember, you gotta have enough gas to get you through 2 weeks. I would say 2 weeks. So you're gonna have to have like 40 or 60 gallons of gasoline. Now this is a dual fuel generator and it runs off propane and gasoline. So if you have one of these, you can get a propane tank, one of those 20-pound propane tanks, and it'll last 30 hours. Of course, you could get a bigger propane tank and it would last you longer, but if you could calculate all that out, 2 weeks, how many hours are in 2 weeks, and figure out, okay, that's how much propane I need. Propane's a little expensive. Now you can get your propane tanks filled up, and it's a lot cheaper doing it that way. But if you have to go to Dollar General to buy tanks, first of all, they don't fill it up. They give you 4 gallons instead of 5 gallons of propane at Dollar General, and it's $60 just to get the canister with propane in it. Now if you did an exchange, it's $20. At least it is here. I guess before you start it up, make sure you check the oil and change the oil, and then start it up. Make sure your filter's clean. When you start it up, it's not good enough to just start it up and listen to it run. You're going to want to actually plug something into it. I would plug in the thing that you're wanting to run. So like the freezer, let's say the freezer needs to run while you're out of electricity. Hook that freezer up to this thing for a couple hours. Make sure that it's in good running order. That generator I had up on the hill, although I knew it was going out, would run just fine, but as soon as you put a load on it, it would run for 10 or 15 minutes and it was really bad shape. What I think can happen to these generators is the motor runs fine, but the inverter, this is an inverter generator, or the generator itself in those industrial strength ones, they go out. And so you don't know that they went out until you actually plug something into it. Now that's a good point. This is an inverter generator, so it uses a lot less gas than an industrial strength generator. So this one will last 11 hours on a gallon. The industrial strength generator will last, I think 1 gallon lasts 3 hours. Now I have 2 generators here. I got this little one. This one just powers the battery charger. That's all it does. This one used to run the well, but now I can run the well off solar panels, so I don't need to worry about that near as much. I don't know how many people live in a hurricane area and they have solar panels. I know that when a big thunderstorm comes through here and there's a risk of hail, what I do is I turn my solar panels upside down and I stack 2 or 3 of them on top of each other. This is one of the reasons why I don't put them on a fixture. And then I can take this metal and put on top of it, take some cinder blocks, put on top of the metal. That way when it hails, it hit the metal and not the solar panels, and I don't risk breaking them. And even if somehow the hail was able to go through the metal or the metal blew off, if I stack them like that, my thinking is it would only bust the top solar panel. So if I had 3 stacks of 4, I'd only lose 4 solar panels out of all of them, because each one on top would break from the hail. Now, one other thing that when we're talking about electric, everybody has a generator in their yard. Even if you didn't buy one of these little things, you have a generator sitting in your yard right now. I would imagine 99% of my audience has a generator in their yard and they don't even know it. Your car produces DC electric, just like those batteries in there do. You can turn that car into a generator. Just go to Walmart and buy yourself an inverter. So I showed you those inverters in there. This is an extra inverter I have. And all you got to do is open your hood up, put positive of this cable. You can see the red and the black. So you hook that positive up to the positive of your battery, that negative up to the negative of your battery. And then you just run an extension cord from your freezer to the power on that. I would get at least a 1,000-watt inverter for your freezer. Anything less than that is going to really struggle. This one's 2,000 watts. It would actually be better. So turn your car on before you do this, because you're going to need to run the car so that alternator is charging that battery. And so however much gas you got in your car is how long you're going to be able to run it. So again, if you're going to run your freezer, run it for a few hours, shut it off. Let it sit for a while, maybe 2 or 3 times a day. Run it for a couple hours. Now, while we're sitting here talking about food, if you have no way of powering your freezer, now don't do anything silly like try to run an air conditioner. Just get some fans and do the best you can to stay cool. I know it gets hot. I mean, I get it. It's hot here. But if you get some fans, it'll help. So your food is your primary thing if you have a generator. But if you don't have a generator, make sure you eat your frozen food first. Tonight, when you have supper, eat your frozen food. Even if it's all you have in the freezer is meat, just eat meat. Don't eat any potatoes or corn or any of that. Just eat the hamburger that you have in the freezer, whatever you got. And then for the next several days, do the same thing. Just eat the meat. And then after that, then you switch over to the canned foods or whatever you eat. Now, Carolyn and I only eat meat. So we can our meat also. So we have a freezer and then we have that canned food. And now you want to think about your water. You're going to want to fill your bathtub up. If you have no way of getting water once the power goes out, fill your bathtub up. Now we have an IBC tank. We fill up to 275 gallons. I'm actually surprised by how much water people use. Carolyn and I together only use about 30 gallons a day on average, but there are people who will use 275 gallons by themselves in one day. So think about that. Don't be wasting water. Don't be flushing your toilet with every flush. You know, I'm not going to get into disgusting colors and things, but there's sometimes you don't need to flush, and then there's other times you do need to flush. Just flush those times. You'll have to fill the water up with the back of the tank and all that. The more storage you can find for water, the better. If you have a well, you may want to think about contamination. Of course, you're going to have to run that well. So like Dad does, he hooks it up to a generator, but if you're going to drink it, you're still going to want to boil that water. I know, it's hot. Hopefully you have like a grill, outdoor grill with propane that you can heat your water up with. If all necessary, if you want to purify your water, you can get a gallon of bleach and you go to USDA or you just Google it. How much bleach do I put in a gallon of water? And it's like a teaspoon or eighth of a teaspoon of bleach you put in the water. You mix it up and then you just let it sit. And in over an hour, that bleach will evaporate out, but it will purify your water. So that's an option. But of course, I'm not going to tell you how to do that in case you get sick, that you can't hold me responsible. Just go on Google. I think the USDA or the FDA, somebody tells you how to do that in emergencies. We put bleach in our water once a month, just kind of kill the algae and stuff. So I watched the Prepper channel the other day, and he was warning everybody about the hurricane, and I was thinking, man, this is a good idea. Maybe I can come up with a video idea from him. And he didn't mention one thing that you need to do to prepare. Imagine that, a prepping channel not telling you how to prep. So I thought I would at least try to cover it. Only thing he wanted to talk about is, hey, you're getting bad weather, as though he was some sort of meteorologist. So if you click this up next box, it'll take you to a video where I was talking about companies lying to you about living off grid. So if I can inspire you to not be prepared, just think smart so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.